Hello, everyone. It is indeed a pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Stephen Thomas. He is a 12 times Microsoft MVP. Great. He's clearly one of the very early adopters of the product, working since the earliest release of BizTalk Server. You probably know him as the driving force behind biztalkgurus.com. Today, Stephen will drive us through his 20 years journey in Microsoft Integration technologies. Over to you, Stephen.
Hey, thank you for the introduction. I'd like to thank everybody for joining me at my session today, and let's get started. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about me in case you don't know me from past integrates. I've been consulting for over 20 years now. I've been working with Microsoft-based integration solutions for 20 years exactly, marked this year. So I'm really proud of that accomplishment. I've been a 15-year Microsoft MVP. I've spent most of my career working with BizTalk Server, but recently I've been starting to work with Logic Apps and other Azure technologies. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out to me at steven@stephenwthomas.com, or you can reach me on Twitter at StephenWThomas. I want to get started by pointing out a few learning resources for anybody that's not familiar with Logic Apps or wants to learn more about their features or learn more about Azure messaging. I have 4 courses available on Pluralsight. I have 2 courses that are a little bit older, a getting started course and a fundamentals course. I have 2 newer courses, which are part of the Microsoft Azure developer track at Pluralsight. One's on creating enterprise Logic Apps. I cover both creating Logic Apps and doing deployments via DevOps. And I have one on enterprise messaging and inventing, where I take a look at the service bus, the event hub, and some other features of Azure from a messaging perspective. If you keep an eye out, Pluralsight tends to have free viewing weekends for anybody that doesn't have a Pluralsight subscription. I also have a few hands-on labs available. The labs are a bit dated, but they still walk you through creating Logic Apps step by step. You can find those at stephenwthomas.com/labs. I wanted to talk a little bit about last year's conference. I wasn't able to make it to London. The day before I was scheduled to fly out, my mom gave me a call and said she had water in her basement. So I had to fly home and help her move everything out of her basement and tear up the carpet. But I was able to present my session at the Seattle Integrate Conference. My session I did last year was called Supercharging BizTalk Server Using Azure Integration Technologies. And I'll give you a quick high-level overview of that session, since you weren't able to see it. I showed an example of doing content-based routing on images. So I could upload an image of Ken's or an image of Richard, and it would get routed to the right folder. This was done using cognitive services to process the images, and then a Logic App for workflow and to bridge the on-prem and cloud connection. I then used BizTalk to interpret the properties of the message and send it to the right folder inside of our firewall. The key takeaway from the session last year was Azure AI plus BizTalk equals supercharged content-based routing. So now let's talk about what I'm going to talk about in today's session. So the session I'm doing today is very different than any session I've done in the past. It's not really a technical session. I would call it more of a strategy session related to integration. And plus, I've thrown in a little bit of integration history for us along the way. But before I dive into the details of our session, I'm going to spend a few minutes covering what we've been doing the past 2 months. I think we're in a unique situation where many of us have been working from home and kids have been off from school. And if we were there in person, we'd be sharing these stories with each other. Since we're not, I'm going to share a couple pictures of what we've been doing the past 2 months. Then I'm going to talk about the evolution of messaging and integration. Then jump forward to our current state and see what new problems we have today to solve with Azure technologies. And last, we're going to take a look at the future state of integration. So the past few months, like many people around the world, we've gotten a puppy. It was a perfect time to introduce her to the family, and has kept the kids busy for countless hours. She's definitely going to be sad when we all have to go back to work and school, and she's going to be left at home all by herself. I've also picked up what I would consider gourmet cooking. So prior to March, my idea of cooking was opening a box of macaroni and cheese. And now I made bourbon, vanilla French toast, complete with bacon and a chocolate garnish. So that looked good. We've been spending a lot of time outside. My daughter found a 6-foot snake skin in our backyard, and I'm sure glad that we didn't find the snake that went along with it. And we also have a tarantula living on our back patio. The picture doesn't do it justice. The tarantula is about the size of my hand and is by far the biggest tarantula I've ever seen. So we'll look out the window and we'll just see them walking up our wall. We've also been doing a lot of challenges. So people not familiar with this, there's people on YouTube that do all these challenges, like the Easter egg challenge or the 24-hour in a car challenge. My wife and daughter were doing the spy laser challenge here. And they were doing this while I was actually practicing for this session. And I heard a bunch of screaming coming from downstairs. And I'll let you decide the results of this challenge, if this was a pass or a fail. We've been doing a lot of Zoom calls. We had a call with Mikkel and Richard and Kent and Steph John. Was a nice way to keep us all in touch, a nice Zoom call covering 4 different countries. And last, I've been working on the same project for 18 months, and we actually went live with everyone being remote. So we spent the first 16 months 100% on site, and we're able to successfully deliver a project integrating 5 departments with everyone remote. So now let's dive into our content. I'm going to start with a quote here from a Chinese philosopher, Confucius, from 500 BC. And he said, study the past if you would define the future. So what this means is we can look at past integration strategies, past integration transformations, and use that to help us define how we want to do integration in the future. So that got me thinking, what was some of the first early messaging and integration platforms? What did the integrators way before us think of building in their systems? Well, one of the first integration platforms or meshing platforms I could think of was the homing pigeon. They were used over 5,000 years ago in Egypt to send messages about anything the pharaoh needed to know about. And I got thinking a little bit more about the homing pigeon and the integrators that built this system to have the pigeons fly and their messages. And you know, they have a lot of the same problems we face today. They have latency issues, like how long is it going to take the pigeon to fly there? They have reliability issues, like is the pigeon going to make it there? They have guaranteed delivery issues, same as we do. How do I ensure that the pigeon made it there? But they have a problem that we typically don't face. They could get eaten by a hawk. So generally in my integration solutions, I don't have to worry about getting eaten by a hawk. So now let's fast forward 5,000 years to the year 2000. The 2000 was when I first started getting into integration, and it really was a turning point for integration. So what was happening? Well, we were seeing a transformation going from EDI-based kind of flat file integration to a more XML-centric type of integration. Now, let's take a look at why we were seeing this happen at this point. Well, first, we saw a huge demand for cross-company integration. It was growing like never before because people were tired of the manual process of sending invoices and waiting for payment. At the same time, they didn't want the expense of building a complex and challenging EDI solution. So with that, with the rise of XML, it definitely lowered the bar to build a new system to do integration. This allows you to very easily read the message and understand the data that's coming into the system. When you can easily understand the data coming in through the XML message, it makes it a lot easier to build a system to handle that message. Even though XML was easier to read, we still needed a lot of custom code or some type of integration engine to help us with our process. So also in 2000, we saw the rise of messaging engines. This was when we were first introduced to BizTalk Server, as well as other companies coming out with products like Informatica, Tibco, WebMethods, and many more. It seemed like every major software producer was coming out with an integration engine. This was great because it made it even easier to build our integration solution. Back in the day, BizTalk's big advantage was always its cost, sometimes costing 25% of what the other products would charge from a licensing perspective. With the rise in importance of BizTalk, the developer cost did go up as well. I think in 2004, 2005, the BizTalk developer was one of the highest paying tech jobs. Now this got me thinking, some of you may never have had the pleasure to work with BizTalk 2000. And even some on this call might not even have been born in 2000. So I grabbed a few screenshots of what the early product looked like just to bring us back to the good old days. We had a schema editor, but back then it was XDR was the main schema format that it liked. We had a visual mapper, and it kind of looks like we have today, but it had a lot less functoids. It was very limited in what you had. We had a workflow engine. The workflow engine was actually built on top of Visio. So you had to install Visio to open the workflow. On the left, you would build your workflow. On the right, you would define how you're going to implement that workflow. We had 4 choices, and that was it. We could write a COM component. We could write a VB script. We could go to a messaging queue, or we could do BizTalk messaging. I spent many hours writing VB scripts to build in my workflows. And here's what a completed workflow would look like. You would use channels in the middle to bridge your connection between the two. In addition to the workflow engine, we had, just like we saw today, we had an administration console. Now let's jump forward 20 years and let's take a look at present day integration. Once again, we're seeing a huge transformation in the way we handle integration and even think of how we handle messages to begin with. We see a major shift like we did 20 years ago. First off, we're seeing a move to a JSON messaging format. This has really started a few years ago and is really just a streamed down version of what an XML message looks like. It still makes it readable, but it saves a lot of space. We also see the rise of what I would consider worldwide cloud integration. This means that no longer do we think of integration as really a B2B type scenario, but it's really now we need to integrate with any system throughout the world. With so many products being software as a service, everyone has their own different way to do integration. So that's moving away from B2B into a cloud scenario. We also see a huge move in consumer to business messaging, or C2B messaging. Everyone seems to have a smartphone and makes it very easy to take pictures and send those pictures to our businesses directly. This is unlike anything we saw before. We find that people want to know more about everything and be able to control it. So 20 years ago, you would say the temperature in my house is 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Nowadays, you say the temperature in my house, well, what room do you want to know about? So people want to know the temperature in every room of their house. And not only that, they want to be able to control that temperature as they see fit in each individual room. Not only that, they want to be able to predict events. They want a system smart enough to know what times of day they're in certain rooms, who's going to be in that room, and what kind of temperature they like it at. So that way the system can use weather information and humidity information and make that room the right temperature before that person even arrives. We also see a need to simplify environments. The days of building complex BizTalk environments and complex integration environments on premise, I think are probably over, which is kind of a good thing. And we see a further lowering of the bar for development, which is also good, makes it easier to do things in the real world. So why are we seeing another transformation here about 20 years after we just saw another major transformation? Well, quite simply, a lot of B2B integration is already done. So for the past 20 years, we've been hard at work building out all the mission critical processes in the enterprise. So now we're really left at looking at what else can we automate and how can we add more value. We want to look at continuing to reduce any manual processes. So anytime we get a paper form through the mail, we want to look at ways to handle that in an automated way. We also see that new systems are cloud-based, and a lot of these systems integrate very differently. They generally have an API, which you could call and get access to, but you're definitely limited to the way that they expose their data to you and how you want to integrate with them. Azure has helped a lot, and it's essentially trivialized the environment setup and made communication with many third parties very simple through its connectors. Logic Apps also makes things a lot easier. Logic Apps makes it so simple for anyone to open up and be an integrator, be a developer. And if you're like me, it's a dream come true for someone who considers himself a drag and drop developer. I can right click in my designer window and add all sorts of actions and drag them all over as much as I like. So it makes life a lot easier and speeds up development time as well. We also see customer interaction directly with business is a lot simpler than it used to be. So now through all the means of social media, such as Twitter and Facebook, it's very easy for me to get direct access to a company. And we find more than ever with the rise of social media and the fact that people can say anything, anywhere about your brand reputation is more important than ever. So this gives the rise to several new scenarios. So some of these scenarios are really related to interpreting image and video files. So why is it important to interpret image and video files? Well, it can help with fraud prevention. So you can ensure the store clerk is really checking out each item as they pass through the scanner. You can help with customer service feedback. So if someone sends you a picture of a damaged package, for example, you could analyze that picture and determine how damaged the package is even before somebody reviews it. You have body and dash cam review. With so many police officers and cars out there that have dash cam videos running constantly, being able to automatically process this video and mark key frames could be very important. You have insurance assessments via drone. So about 10 years ago, we had a hail damage on our roof. It took several days for an adjuster to come out. They had to bring 2 people. It took them about an hour to climb up on the roof. All that can be done now in just a few minutes with the drone flying by. Plus, you get much higher quality pictures. Content moderation. So if you have a user change their profile picture, for example, you can ensure that it's not changed to something inappropriate. And then you can do real-time analysis of video feeds. So if you have a feed of customers walking in and out of an area, you can determine if they're happy or sad and help change the scenarios that might be there to help them feel better or get the more desired result. We also see a need to automatically react to events impacting your brand. So this goes way beyond just monitoring social media for tweets that might be negative. It's really building workflows that help support ensuring that follow-up is done on these negative tweets or positive tweets as well. So that's using logic apps to build workflows that can send out notifications, create service requests, anything that you would need as part of your workflow. We also see a large need of working with edge devices and AI modules. So that way we can automatically program our thermostats, for example, and get them to do what we want them to do. So what kind of Azure solutions exist to help us with this? Well, first off, we all know there's logic apps, and that can be used for our workflows. We have cognitive services, which I really feel are real key to a lot of cool and new upcoming integration solutions. Cognitive services is a lot of tooling on top of the powerful AI workflows inside of Azure. Makes it super simple to do image processing, video analysis, and a whole host of other things. So if you're not looking at cognitive services, I definitely suggest taking a look at them. We have Azure connectors, which connects to hundreds of APIs all throughout the world. They make life really easy for doing complex integrations. We have the Azure IoT Hub, which we can use to manage and push out code updates to all of our IoT devices. We have Azure AI Solutions, which we can use to build complex models. And then we have Azure Event Hub to have a reactive process. So let's take a little bit more detailed look at one of these new sample solutions. So I did a POC for a customer around a new loan creation. So this works like this. The customer would use their cell phone to take a picture of the front and back of their driver's license. That would be sent via text message to the loan application process. We had a logic app and a third-party processing tool to send us the text message, and a logic app to handle the inbound request and user validation. Based on the phone number that the license was sent from, we could look it up in our system and try to determine if they were an existing customer. We use connectors and AI features for image processing of the driver's license, and we would parse all that information on the driver's license and create a metadata file, essentially, that had all the text information of the driver's license. We would then use service bus queues to send the enriched message and the images of the driver's license to BizTalk. Then BizTalk on-prem would be used for integration with the legacy systems. So it would reach out to the loan system, automatically create the loan, get a loan decision, and actually send the results back to the customer via text message. Now, those of you that may have worked with driver's license processing systems in the past, a lot of times they're closed loop systems. They have custom hardware for scanning and very difficult to work with. Not only that, they're very expensive. This solution here would cost the customer a few cents every time it ran. Some other things with the new era of integration solutions is we might ask ourselves different questions. And what are some of the things we might like to know? Like, what % of customers leaving a self-service checkout are happy? That would be useful. What % of people walking into a store are wearing a mask? Definitely relevant in this time. You could even have a screen that displays this information outside the store You could list the count of people in the store, because we all have capacity controls on our stores now, as well as the percent of people wearing masks. So I could make a decision even before I go in the store if it's safe, given my point of view, to do my shopping there. We could also determine the percent chance a person walking into a bank is a new customer. So if they're a new customer, we might want to reach up and greet them differently. And we might also be able to determine, well, what's the percent chance that this customer is angry? That might be nice to know. Again, we'd present ourselves differently to them. But what else? What if we query out to the criminal database and determine that that person was arrested in the past for robbery? Well, now again, we might approach this person very differently. So now I want to share one of my experiences for working with 2020 messaging. So in the past, 20 years ago, if you had a problem with the microwave, you pretty much had phone-only support. You could call them. They might send a technician out. They might tell you to box it up and send it back, which would be horribly inconvenient. Today, customer service takes many different forms: phone, email, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and many more. So we had a problem with our microwave, and we were communicating with customer service via email. We were going round and round and not really getting anywhere. So let me switch over and show you a video of what I did to help streamline our getting support. Hopefully you're seeing the video.
This is the microwave oven just running the pizza mode, reheat pizza, and this is what happens. There is definitely something wrong with the sensor in this microwave, and I really would like to get this fixed. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully you all saw that video. If not, this was the end result. It was pizza basically caught on fire. So I posted this video on YouTube. I sent out a tweet sending it to the manufacturer. And within a few hours, I was contacted by a very different customer support group, the group that handles monitoring their social media. And within about, I'd say about 2 days, they had a technician out at our house replacing the microwave. So now it might just seem like somebody's there just monitoring social media, and they may have been. But I like to think more, they probably had a complex workflow behind that process. They could be monitoring Twitter for the negative sentiment or links to YouTube. They could have workflow engines in the back to notify customer service to follow up, and have a workflow to automatically send this type of information to engineering to, again, find out what's going on with this process. So now let's take a look at what we think messaging and integration is going to look like in 2024. So we know for sure we're going to see new problems, and we're also going to have better solutions to solve them. So what are my predictions for integration in 2024? Well, first off, I'm thinking we're going to have a new messaging format. As history has told, about every 20 years, we seem to change formats. I think we'll have a new messaging format that's probably more embedded with images and videos to make those being along with data messages a lot easier to handle. I also might envision a new video format that actually makes your video smaller size, but still preserves high resolution. We might also have integrated videos and images everywhere. That seems to be kind of a trend now. Every system will just seem to automatically support these. I think all the finally never cloud people will finally be moved to the cloud. I think we'll have better master data management. I've spent many years of my career for many different clients trying to solve just one problem, and that is keep my customer information synced across all my on-premise and cloud environments. And that's a very difficult problem to solve, given all the nuances of every different system. I'm a firm believer that a customer should only have one home address, and hopefully we have better ways to solve that in the future. I would envision some AI-based solution that is intelligent enough to scan multiple systems and do that kind of analysis. Will we have BizTalk Server 2024? Well, probably not. I think we'll have a good migration to move off that, and I think probably in 20 years we might actually be beyond BizTalk Server. And the very last prediction I have is, just in case, we'll have a hawk-proof cage around all of our servers. So with that, I'd like to get your thoughts on what you think integration in 2024 will be like. Where would you like to see it go? What do you think we'll be doing as far as messaging? Is images and video going to be key? Use the hashtag integrate2024 and let's share your thoughts on where you think integration is going. With that, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions at steven@stevenwthomas.com. And ironically, this is the picture I end most of my presentations with, and it actually looks a lot like our dog Lily, but that was just coincidental. So thank you everybody for attending my session. I'm going to jump over and see if I can find if there's any questions. Okay, I don't seem to see any questions now, but if you have anything, just reach out to me. Thank you.
Stephen, there is a question. Vivek Kulkarni have asked, we cannot validate JSON instances against JSON schema generated.
Oh, yeah, JSON validation is always challenging. I don't have a specific answer for that. Go ahead and shoot me an email, and I can try to help you with that. So steven@stevenwthomas.com. Any other questions?
I have only one question, Stephen. I have a couple of more. I'll just
Okay.
You can see it in the accepted tab.
So does Logic Apps have all the capabilities that BizTalk so we can migrate? I think yes, it has all the capabilities and more, but it approaches things a little bit differently. So at times, BizTalk is very durable, very guaranteed, very heavy, I would call it. Logic Apps, I feel, is a little bit lighter. But I can't really imagine anything you can't do in Logic Apps that you can do in BizTalk. It's more using the tool that's going to come out in the fall to help you migrate those items over, especially now that we have more flexibility on where we can run our Logic Apps. I think it's going to make a lot more sense for that. Integrate 2024, integrate 2040. So I'm looking for # integrate 2040. So I've been working in integration 20 years. Where do people think we're going to be at 20 years from now? So we're all back here at integrate 2024, or sorry, integrate 2040. We can look back at our Twitter hashtag and see if any of our predictions were true. So hopefully we see everybody back at integrate 2040. Okay, I think that's it.
You have one more question, Stephen. XML to JSON is real pain. How we should target that?
That's another great question. I think the BizTalk handles it pretty well. When I've had to do XML to JSON, I actually run it through a BizTalk pipeline and do that conversion there. I think there's XML to JSON conversion features in Logic App as well. It does. I think there's a function that does that. But JSON itself is kind of schemaless, so it's tough to define the nodes as you would really like it to. It's just a bunch of collection of arrays. So yeah, no, it is challenging, but I think as we move forward and more systems are natively built in JSON, a lot of those problems will work themselves out.
Yeah, okay. The next question is from Marcelo. What is the difference between data integration and application integration?
Data integration, I tend to think of as more database centric. So you're going database to database, kind of directly, more like an ETL process. Application integration generally goes through their front end, their APIs, their pre-built stored procedures. That's kind of what I would define application integration as compared to data integration.
Okay. The next question is from Pujit. He's asked, XML to JSON is better to do with functions, especially with array versus object validation.
Yes, yes, that's what I've done before in Logic Apps. So, but if you get some of these really large, complex XMLs, sometimes it can be a little more challenging to work with. But it's definitely something that I think better tools will become available, as we go on. So maybe that's another thing in Integrate 2040. We'll be having automatic XML to JSON conversion, anything that could automatically parse EDI documents would be great as well, because I'm sure 20 years from now we'll still have EDI systems and flat file systems around. So on that note, we did get reached out to by a customer a couple months ago wanting to upgrade their BizTalk 2000 environment to BizTalk 2020. So there we go. 20 years from now, we'll still have customers wanting to upgrade. So.
Okay, the next question is like, how is the increased presence of ERP systems like SAP in enterprises and other organizations impacting the integration space? It seems they removed a lot of the needs for it.
They do. As you, I was on a project called the Global SAP Implementation, where they were moving all of their systems to one massive global SAP system. That would definitely reduce the need for integration, but I think you'll always find, at least in my experience, clients, certain groups of clients have divisions that are very stubborn and won't get on board, and there's reasons that the business allows them to get away with that. I've never seen a true global implementation that doesn't have a need for integration. Even when we did the global SAP project, there was many points of integration to third-party vendors, and you always kind of have your B2B scenarios. And now more and more, it's your SAP to cloud provider scenarios.
Okay, and the next question is from Vinod Kumar. He asks, does Logic App store data in anywhere as BizTalk stores in SQL, which can be resumed in some failures?
Yes. Logic Apps is amazing at the way it details out step-by-step of a Logic App execution. So you can go into any past run of your Logic Apps and see action by action what the input and output was. So when there is an error, you can see where that error was. And you do have an option per Logic App to resume that Logic App, and it'll start it back at the beginning again. Now, if you needed to make changes to that Logic App, or if there was a bug or something, that might be a different story. But you would definitely have your input message that you could archive off and resubmit. So Logic Apps is very good at that. It makes the debugging process significantly better than what we saw in BizTalk. The orchestration debugger was kind of cumbersome, but Logic Apps is amazing.
Okay, the next question is from Siddharth Bansal. He asks, do you see any limitations with using Azure Logic Apps with high volume data?
It depends on how high volume you're talking about. So there's the ICE environments, the integration isolated environments that you can use to get a better streamlined experience. I've never had any throughput high volume problems with Logic Apps. I think if I remember right, I cover high volume scenarios in my Azure Fundamentals class on Pluralsight. But it's built on the cloud. The biggest problem I see is maybe a slow bit of latency when you're first initializing your Logic Apps. I think they've made some steps to correct that. But in general, you should have a much better high volume scenario or process than we did in BizTalk. So BizTalk, you'd have to scale by expensively adding new servers. Here, your Logic App should be able to take care of that. The one thing to note is that most of the connectors inside of Logic Apps have their own rate limits. So when you look up a connector on MSDN or the website Docs, Microsoft Docs, they'll tell you what their throughput connections are. And it's usually per 30 seconds or per 60 seconds. So you get 100 executions per 30 seconds or something like that, which isn't really a lot. The more popular adapters like SQL, they've done a lot of work to get those executions up. So that would be the biggest thing you'd want to look at when you're designing a high volume scenario.
Okay, the next question is from Ben. You list some quite scary scenarios using AI and personal privacy. Do we as developers need some ethic rules?
That is a great question, And actually my wife had the same feedback when she was looking at my slides. Yeah, it depends on what you want to do. I think the scenarios outlined here wasn't really about tracking personal data of an individual person. It's really more about designing processes that make your business better. Now, some businesses will hijack that and track your cell phone data and track your face image and want to know everything about you. And that's kind of the way a lot of places are going today. But you don't have to build something like that. And it's up to your country of what their rules are. It's up to you as a developer and your company as a whole as to where they feel on that. But you could definitely get into some privacy concerns. But if you're doing something like just simply checking if somebody's wearing a mask when they walk in the store and then counting them when they walk out, I don't think there's a big privacy concern in something like that. Consider it more like public knowledge. So that's a great question.
Okay. Stephen asks, have you seen complex use of integration accounts, that is flat file schema and maps?
I haven't. So one of my clients does use integration accounts, and I built them an EDI system that they had to send and receive EDI documents. And I will say the experience in Logic Apps was significantly better than the experience in BizTalk Server. The complexity was not there. It was pretty much the same tools, so I was kind of used to working with them. But I haven't seen customers build out. This was just a couple of transactions each way. I haven't seen anybody build out real large-scale implementations of it, but I wouldn't be concerned with that. Again, I'd keep an eye on my rate limits as it relates to the actions that you're working with and the connectors that you're working with, because if you call, transformation, for example, that's a connector, and that's going to have a rate limit. But generally, with EDI transactions, I would imagine you stay within those limits.
Okay. The next question is from Ilango. Do you think Logic Apps can become cloud agnostic, running on functions, runtime on containers?
I think that's where they're going. I think that looks like exciting technology. I think that'll be good. Whether it gets to be cloud agnostic and it can run in Amazon Web Services, I'm not sure. The connectors play a big role in a lot of that, how those connectors run and are hosted and stuff like that. But there definitely seems to be a push in being cloud agnostic. A lot of companies make their whole business around that. So we'll see. So I personally tend to see clients, sophisticated clients, want to have multiple clouds, but the vast majority of at least the customers I work with, they're barely struggling to learn one cloud provider. Generally, it tends to be Microsoft on the Azure side if they're calling me in. But so that's kind of where that stands. Okay.
Mohammed Elias asks, which is the cost efficient for customers who use BizTalk older versions in your opinion? Moving to BizTalk 2020 or to move to Azure?
Oh, that's a great question. I could ask that a lot. I'd say it depends on your tolerance for moving to the cloud. Like I said, my prediction for 2040 is that all the never cloud people will be in the cloud. We still have a lot of people that are strongly rooted on on-prem integration and on-prem systems. Like the client I did that POC for, where we did the new loan application, they have 25 different systems on-prem that do everything from loans to customers to account information to online banking. And every system is completely and totally different. For them, I could never recommend moving to Logic Apps because they would just be going from their data center, to a Logic App, which may be hosted there, may be hosted in the cloud, and then data coming back again, especially if they have an existing BizTalk environment already. I would say that upgrading to BizTalk 2020, if you have a lot of those on-premise integrations, is a smart bet. But definitely keep in mind, I would say new integrations that you're building out, new work, you'd want to look at how to use Logic Apps for that. Then I think there'll just be a natural progression when it feels right for your enterprise to move to Logic Apps. I have talked to a couple clients that were looking at doing BizTalk to Logic App migrations, but they were still just kind of in the same phase you are, asking questions on if they should and when is the right time to do that. I think we're getting close, but we still have BizTalk 2020 out there as an option, and that'll bring our support cycle to I think 2030. So that'll buy us some time.
The next question is, any experience of migrating BRE policies to Azure options? Which one you can recommend?
No, unfortunately, I have no experience with that. So sorry, I can't help you with that. But shoot me off an email if you want, and I can try to do some research, put some thought into it. Not something that I've come across so far.
Okay. The next question is from Philip. In Integrate 2040, do you believe that we have a new integration format like XML or JSON?
Yep, I think we will. We'll have a new messaging format for sure. As we look at past history, every 20, 15 years, messaging format changes. EDI, flat file, to XML, to JSON. I think there'll be something new. What it'll be like, I don't know. Maybe we'll go back to the old days where you had SOAP messages with attachments, so we can easily attach images and videos or something along those lines. I think space and size is a little bit less of an issue as it was 20 years ago. But at the same time, if we start sending large video files, which is something I see more and more, the need for large video files, we'll have to have new ways to handle that.
Okay, the next question is from Rituraj. He asks, how are the challenges both organization and architectural being seen when a lot of applications are coming with their integration capabilities?
It's definitely a challenge. And that's the biggest thing I see driving, my workload, right, is everybody has a different way to integrate. As I talked about the master data record for address, some of the huge problems that a specific client had is they have multiple systems all with different integration paradigms. So some you could do an upsert, so you send in a message, and if the data is different, it updates it. Some, if you send in an empty field, it would delete it. So it's every system has its own challenges, and each one has to be analyzed on its own. Definitely causes architectural issues. Like I said, you end up getting where you need a master data repository, query out the system, see what's different, and then integrate with their specific, integration technology. But no, that's definitely a challenge point today. And there's no real good way to solve it other than taking them system by system. So maybe in 2040, we'll have a standardized integration approach across all, SaaS providers and on-prem providers. That would be good.
Okay, the next question is like how to maintain log or history in Logic Apps?
It's done automatically for you. I don't remember the current retention period, but you can see all your executions right there when you click on a Logic app. You can also use some of the Azure logging tools to log that out. It can just be done automatically for you. Just enable it. And then you're able to keep the data much longer. I don't believe it's as rich, like it's more like execution information, but all that information is just right there in Logic Apps. It's a lot more, the data retained within the Logic App area itself is a lot more detailed than what we get, say in BizTalk when we track messages. The data when we save it off is more like what we would see in BizTalk from our messages.
Okay, the last question, how you see BizTalk SFTP versus Logic App SFTP connector?
The SFTP connector? Again, I think it kind of depends on how your environment is set up today. I just did a project just last week where I flipped a client over to use the SFTP v2 adapter in Logic Apps. It made sense for them because they already have all their processes in Logic Apps. If you already have your processes in BizTalk, you could use that SFTP adapter. I think the one in Logic Apps has a little bit more functionality and supports, I think, a little bit different use cases than the BizTalk one. But you can always look at Microsoft Docs and do a detailed analysis. You just want to make sure it supports what you need it to support. So.
Yeah, that's all, Stephen. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have more questions? Shoot me an email, and thanks for attending my session. Don't forget, #Integrate 2040. Share your thoughts.
Covey.co.